I'm Tamsin Greer, 18 years old. Until 3 weeks ago, I believed that hard work guaranteed fairness. I believed that if you followed the rules, stayed quiet, and earned your place, the world would honor that. Then my parents sat me down at our kitchen table and told me my college fund was gone. They'd spent every penny on my cousin Logan's fourth rehab stint. I felt the floor disappear beneath me, like I was falling through the foundation of everything I'd built my life on. My father's words still echo in my mind. Logan needed it more than you do right now. What they didn't know was that I had been working 2 jobs since sophomore year, saving every dollar I could to supplement that fund. I'd sacrificed parties, friendships, and sleep for 4 years. But here's what makes this story even more unbelievable. I wasn't even surprised. How could 18 years of being the responsible one prepare me for what came next? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I should probably start from the beginning, or at least from the moment when everything felt normal. That would be graduation day, exactly 2 months and 5 days ago. I remember standing in that gymnasium, wearing my cap and gown, holding my diploma with the perfect attendance pin glinting under the fluorescent lights. 4 years, 0 absences. Even when I had the flu junior year, I dragged myself to school because missing a day felt like breaking a promise I made to myself that my parents were in the 3rd row. Mom in her best dress, the navy one she wore to church and job interviews, and Dad in his only tie. They were beaming, actually beaming. I can still see Mom wiping tears from her eyes as Principal Martinez called my name. Tamsin Greer, graduating summa cum laude, track team captain, National Honor Society president. The applause felt warm, like sunshine on my face. For once, I wasn't thinking about the next thing I had to do, the next goal I had to reach. I was just standing there, diploma in hand, believing that all those years of saying no to parties and yes to extra credit had finally paid off. After the ceremony, we went to Applebee's, our family's version of fancy dining. Dad ordered a beer, which he almost never did, and Mom got the salmon even though it was $3 more than her usual chicken. They kept talking about Marlowe University, about how proud they were, about how I was going to be the first person in our family to graduate from a 4-year college. "You're going to change everything for us, Tam," Mom said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. Her fingers were rough from years of washing dishes at the diner, but her grip was gentle. "All that sacrifice, all those nights you stayed up studying instead of going out with friends, it's going to mean something." I believed her. God, I really believed her. The acceptance letter from Marlowe had arrived in March, and I'd carried it around in my backpack for weeks like a talisman. I'd read it so many times the creases were soft as fabric. "Dear Miss Greer, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted to Marlowe University's class of 2028. Your academic achievements and extracurricular involvement demonstrate the qualities we value in our students." My academic achievements, my extracurricular involvement. Everything I'd earned through 4 years of getting up at 5 a.m. for track practice, staying after school for honor society meetings, working weekend shifts at Bindery Books downtown, and spending my Friday nights writing scholarship ease instead of going to football games. The college fund had been Dad's idea, started when I was in kindergarten. $5 a week, he'd explained to 6-year-old me, showing me the passbook. Savings account with my name on it. Every week, no matter what. By the time you graduate high school, you'll have enough for college. But it became more than that. Mom added tips from good nights at the diner. Dad contributed overtime pay. When Grandma Greer died my sophomore year, they put her small life insurance payout straight into the account. I watched that number grow every month when the statements came in the mail, and it felt like proof that my future was real, that all my hard work was building towards something. Solid dot by senior year, there was almost $38,000 in that account. Not enough for 4 years at Marlowe, but enough for the first 2 years. Especially with the partial scholarship I'd earned from maintaining a 4.0 GPA, I'd already planned it out. Take out minimal loans for junior and senior year. Work summers. To pay them down, graduate debt-free or close to it. I had spreadsheets, color-coded charts, a 5-year plan that included internships and study abroad and everything I'd dreamed about since I was 12 and decided I wanted to be a journalist. I was going to write for the university newspaper, maybe get published in real magazines, eventually work for a paper in a real city where things actually happened. The summer before senior year, I'd even visited Marlowe's campus with Mom. We couldn't afford the official tour, so we just walked around, peeking into buildings and sitting on benches. The library was 5 stories tall with floor-to-ceiling windows, and I pressed my nose against the glass like a little kid at a candy store. That's where I'm going to spend most of my time, I told Mom, and she laughed. You'll make friends too, you know, she said. You don't have to study every second. But I liked studying. I liked the certainty of it, the way hard work translated directly into results. Unlike everything else in my life, school made sense. Put in the effort, get the grade. Follow the rules, earn the reward. Our town, Millfield, wasn't the kind of place where dreams usually came true. The steel mill had closed when I was in middle school, taking most of the good jobs with it. Half my graduating class was planning to commute to the community college 30 minutes away, and the other half was just planning to work and figure it out later. But I was different. I was going to leave. That diploma with the perfect attendance pin represented more than just showing up every day. It represented the choice I'd made over and over to prioritize my future over everything else. While other kids were at parties or hanging out at the mall, I was home studying or at work. While they were dating and going to dances, I was writing essays and filling out applications. I wasn't bitter about it, not really. I was proud. I'd made sacrifices, sure, but they were purposeful sacrifices. They were investments in a future I could see so clearly I could taste it. The plan was simple. Move into the dorms at Marlowe in late August. Start my journalism major, work study to cover books and expenses, graduate in 4 years with good grades and real experience, then move to Columbus or Cincinnati or maybe even Chicago for a job at a real newspaper. I'd rent a tiny apartment, live on coffee and ambition, and write stories that mattered. I'd even started packing in July, folding my clothes into neat stacks and boxing up the books I'd collected over the years. My dorm room assignment came in. The mail, Hartley Hall, 3rd floor, single room, because I'd specifically requested one. I didn't want a roommate who might distract me from studying. Everything was falling into place, exactly as I'd planned. Dad had promised to drive me to campus for move-in day. We'd already mapped out the route, planned to leave early in the morning so we'd have time to get me settled before the welcome events started. Mom had been saving tips to buy me things for my dorm room, new sheets, a small desk lamp, a coffee maker for late-night study sessions. I remember thinking, as I fell asleep the night after graduation, that this was what success felt like. This quiet satisfaction of a plan coming together, of years of work finally paying off. I felt like I'd earned my place in the world. I had no idea that 3 weeks before move-in day, my parents would destroy everything I built my life around with a 10-minute conversation at our kitchen table. But I'm getting ahead of myself because between graduation day and that devastating conversation, there were signs I should have noticed. Little things that didn't quite add up. If I'd been paying attention, instead of being so focused on the future. The first sign something was wrong came in mid-July, when Mom started working extra shifts at the diner. She'd always worked nights, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., but suddenly she was picking up day shifts too, coming home only to shower and change clothes before heading back out. When I asked her about it, she just said they were short-staffed and she needed the money. For what? I'd asked, looking up from my laptop where I was researching my professors for a fall semester. Just expenses, she said, not meeting my eyes. You know how it is, but I didn't know how it was. Our expenses were pretty consistent: rent, utilities, groceries, car payment. Dad's job at Morrison's auto shop was steady, and my part-time work at Bindery Books covered my own costs plus a little extra for the college fund. We weren't rich, but we weren't struggling either. The second sign was Dad's phone calls. They started happening around the same time Mom picked up the extra shifts, usually late at night when he thought I was asleep. I'd hear his voice through the thin walls of our house, low and urgent, sometimes angry. I caught fragments. I don't know what else to do, and she can't keep asking for this. And what about Tamsin's future? I should have pushed harder to find out what was going on. But I was distracted by my own preparations, by the excitement of finally moving toward the life I'd planned for so long. I was reading ahead in my textbooks, researching student organizations. To join, mentally preparing for the independence I'd been craving for years. The third sign was Logan himself that my cousin showed up at our house on a Tuesday in late July, unannounced and carrying a single duffel bag. I was in the kitchen making lunch when I heard the front door open and Dad's voice, surprised and not entirely pleased. "Logan, what are you doing here?" I hadn't seen Logan in almost 2 years, not since the disaster of Christmas 2022 when he'd shown up high and stolen Mom's jewelry to pawn for drug money. Before that, he'd been in and out of our lives since I was little, sometimes clean and charming, sometimes a mess that left everyone walking on eggshells. Logan was 4 years older than me, the son of Dad's sister Evelyn. Aunt Evelyn lived about an hour away in Youngstown, and she had a talent for crisis that somehow always required our family's help. Money, mostly, but sometimes Logan himself would end up on our couch for weeks at a time while he got back on his feet. I'd grown up hearing whisper conversations about Logan's problems, first alcohol in high school, then pills, then harder stuff. There had been arrests, rehab stints, promises to change that lasted a few months before everything fell apart again. By the time I was in high school, I'd learned to tune out the drama. Logan's problems weren't my problems, and I had my own future to focus on. But that Tuesday in July, when I walked into the living room and saw him sitting on our couch, something felt different. He looked older, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes that made him seem hollow. But he was clean-shaved, showered, wearing clothes that fit properly instead of the oversized hoodies he used to hide behind. "Hey, Tam," he said, standing up when he saw me. "Congratulations on graduation, and Marlo, that's amazing." I was surprised by how sincere he sounded. "Thanks," I said, not sure what else to say. "I'm really proud of you," he continued. "You've always been the smart one in this family, the one who had her shit together." Dad was standing by the window, arms crossed, looking uncomfortable. "Logan's just staying for a few days," he said, not looking at either of us, "until he gets situated." "Situated where?" I asked out Logan, and Dad exchanged a look I couldn't read. "I'm starting a program," Logan said finally, "in Columbus. Residential treatment, 6 months minimum. But there's a waiting list, and I needed somewhere to stay until a spot opens up." It sounded reasonable enough, and Logan seemed genuinely committed to getting help. Over the next few days, he was actually pleasant company. He helped Mom with groceries, fixed the wobbly leg on our kitchen table, even sat with me on the porch. One evening while I worked on scholarship thank you letters, "You know," he said, watching me type on my laptop, "I always wished I could have been more like you." "What do you mean?" "Focused, disciplined. You've never made a major mistake in your life, have you?" I thought about it. "I guess not." "Nothing. Big, anyway." "Must be nice," he said, but not in a bitter way. Having a plan that actually works out. I was starting to like this version of Logan, the one who seemed genuinely interested in getting better. So when Mom and Dad started having more hushed conversations, when Dad's late-night phone calls became more frequent, when both my parents started looking stressed and tired all the time, I didn't connect it to Logan's presence in our house. I should have thought the conversations I couldn't quite hear were about money. Specifically about the $65,000 it would cost for Logan's treatment program. The insurance Aunt Evelyn had through her job at the grocery store would cover some of it, but not nearly enough. And Logan couldn't wait for a cheaper program to have an opening. His previous rehab counselor had made it clear that this was his last chance, that if he relapsed again, the legal consequences would be severe. I learned all this later, of course. At the time, I was focused on other things, getting my wisdom teeth out before college, buying textbooks, saying goodbye to the few friends I managed to maintain through high school. I was so focused on my own transition that I completely missed the signs that my family was making decisions that would change everything. The kitchen table conversation happened on a Thursday, 3 weeks before move-in day at Marlowe. Logan had been staying with us for almost 2 weeks, and his spot at the treatment facility had finally opened up. He was supposed to check in the following Monday. I was in my room that afternoon organizing my college supplies and double-checking my course schedule when Mom called me downstairs. "Tamsin, can you come here for a minute? Your dad and I need to talk to you about something." Her voice had a strange quality to it, like she was trying too hard to sound normal. I saved my work and went downstairs, expecting maybe a conversation about logistics for move-in day or a reminder about something I needed to do before leaving for college. Instead, I found both my parents sitting at the kitchen table looking like they were about to deliver terrible news. Dad's hands were folded in front of him, and Mom was fidgeting with a napkin, tearing it into small pieces. "Sit down, honey," Mom said. I sat across from them, suddenly aware of how quiet the house was. Logan was outside somewhere, maybe walking to the gas station for cigarettes like he did most afternoons. "We need to talk to you about your college fund," Dad said without preamble. My stomach dropped. "What about it?" Mom reached across the table like she was going to take my hand, then stopped. "There's been a situation with Logan. He got into a really good treatment program, one that could really help him this time. But it's expensive and Evelyn doesn't have the money." "Okay," I said slowly. "But what does that have to do with my college fund?" Dad cleared his throat. "We've decided to help Logan pay for treatment. As a family, it's the right thing to do." The words didn't make sense at first. I stared at him, waiting for the rest of the explanation, for the part where this didn't involve my money. "How much help?" I asked. Mom and Dad looked at each other. "All of it," Mom said quietly. "We used all of it." The world tilted. Actually tilted, like the floor had suddenly become a slope and I was sliding off the edge of everything I built. My life on. "All of what?" I whispered. "Your college fund," Dad said. "We transferred the money to pay for Logan's treatment. $37,800. I couldn't breathe, literally could not get air into my lungs. "Using my college fund to pay for Logan's rehab." Tamsin, Mom started. Without asking me. We're your parents, Dad said. We don't need to ask your permission to make decisions about our family's finances. Our family's finances. Like the money I'd watched grow for 12 years, the money Mom and Dad had told me was mine for college, the money that represented every sacrifice I'd made and every goal I'd worked toward, that was just family money. They could spend however they wanted. When? I asked. Last week, Mom said. Logan needed to pay the deposit to hold his spot, and then the full amount was due yesterday. Last week, while I was buying textbooks and getting excited about dorm life, they were draining my college account. While I was planning my future, they were destroying it. You know, I start classes in 3 weeks, right? My voice sounded strange, like it was coming from someone else. We know this is hard, Mom said. But Logan needs help, and this is what families do. We help each other. What about helping me? I asked. What about the help I need? You're smart, Dad said. You'll figure something out. Logan was going to die if he didn't get treatment. Logan was going to die. But apparently my future could just be sacrificed without a second thought. There are other options for college, Mom said. Community college, maybe? Or you could take a gap year, work and save money, reapply next year. Other options. Like the acceptance letter I'd carried around for months was just a piece of paper. Like the 4 years I'd spent earning that acceptance meant nothing. Like my dreams were interchangeable with anyone else's backup plan. Logan needed it more than you do right now, Dad added. And those words hit me like a physical blow. I stood up from the table, my chair scraping against the linoleum floor. Both my parents looked relieved, like they thought the conversation was over, like they delivered difficult news and now we could all move on. So that's it, I said. You decided Logan's addiction was more important than my education, and now I'm supposed to just accept that. It's not about importance, Mom said. It's about need. Logan will die without treatment. You won't die without college. Won't die without college. Like college was some luxury I'd been asking for instead of the goal. I'd worked toward every single day for 4 years. I walked upstairs to my room and closed the door. Then I sat on my bed, surrounded by the boxes I'd packed from my dorm room, and tried to understand what had just happened. My college fund was gone. My future was gone. Everything I'd worked for, every sacrifice I'd made, every night I'd stayed home studying instead of going out with friends. All of it had been traded away for Logan's 4th chance at getting clean. And the worst part was, I wasn't even surprised. Deep down, I'd always known that Logan's problems would eventually cost me something. I just hadn't realized the cost would be everything. I didn't cry that night. I wanted to, but the tears wouldn't come. Instead, I sat on my bed staring at the boxes I'd packed for college, feeling like I was looking at artifacts from someone else's life. Someone naive enough to believe that working hard guaranteed fairness. The next morning, I did something I'd never done before in my life. I called in sick to work. Not because I was actually sick, but because I couldn't face Mr. Henderson at Bindery Books asking me about college preparations. With his usual fatherly concern. I couldn't pretend everything was fine when my entire future had been erased overnight. Instead, I walked downtown to Morrison's auto shop to find Dad. I'd spent the night thinking, and I had questions that needed answers. The shop smelled like oil and metal, familiar scents from the handful of times I'd visited Dad at work over the years. He was under the hood of a red pickup truck, his hands black with grease, when I walked in. Tamsin? He looked surprised to see me. Shouldn't you be at work? We need to talk, I said. He wiped his hands on a rag and followed me outside to the small parking lot. The August heat was already oppressive at 9 in the morning, and sweat was beading on Dad's forehead. About yesterday, I said, I want to understand the timeline. What timeline? When did you know Logan would need the money? When did you decide to take mine? How long have you been planning this? Dad looked uncomfortable. Tamsin, it wasn't planned. It was a crisis situation. When did Aunt Evelyn first ask for help? He was quiet for a long moment. About 6 weeks ago. When Logan got accepted to the program. 6 weeks ago. Right after my graduation. And when did you decide to use my college fund? We tried everything else first, he said. We looked into loans, asked the bank about extending our mortgage. But our credit isn't good enough, and we don't have enough equity in the house. When Dad? 3 weeks ago. We made the decision 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago. The same day I got my dorm room assignment in the mail. While I was celebrating. Another step toward my future, my parents were deciding to destroy it. Why didn't you tell me then? Because we knew you'd be upset, and we hoped maybe we could figure out another solution. But you didn't? No, he admitted. We didn't. I stared at him. This man who taught me to change a tire and helped me with math homework and told me I could be anything I wanted if I worked hard enough. Do you understand what you've done to me? Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I understand you're disappointed. Disappointed? The word came out sharper than I intended. Dad, you didn't borrow my money. You didn't ask to use it temporarily. You spent it. It's gone. All of it. Logan needed. Logan is not my responsibility, I said. I didn't choose to have an addict in the family. I didn't choose to enable his problems for years. But I did choose to work my ass off for 4 years. To earn my way to college. And you took that choice away from me. Dad's face was getting red, the way it always did when he was angry or defensive. Logan is family. We don't abandon family. What about me? Am I not family too? Of course you are. But you're strong, Tamsin. You've always been the strong one. Logan is sick. There it was. The truth underneath all the justifications. I was strong so I could handle having my future destroyed. Logan was sick, so he deserved rescuing. My strength was being used against me, turned into a reason why I mattered less. So because I've never been an addict, because I've never caused problems or asked for help, I don't deserve to have my dreams protected. It's not about deserve. Yes, it is. I was surprised by how calm my voice sounded. It's exactly about that. You decided Logan deserves a 4th chance more than I deserve my first one. Dad opened his mouth to argue, but I held up my hand. I'm not done. You also decided to lie to me for 3 weeks. While I was buying textbooks and planning my schedule and getting excited about finally leaving this town, you knew my money was already gone. You let me keep believing in a future that didn't exist anymore. We were trying to protect you. You were protecting yourselves, I said. Because you knew what you were doing was wrong, and you were too cowardly to face me until the last possible minute. That got to him. Dad's face went from red to pale, and he looked away. I need to get back to work, he said finally. Yeah, I said. You do. I walked home feeling empty but strangely clear-headed. The shock was wearing off, replaced by something harder and more useful. Anger. Not the hot, explosive kind that makes you scream and throw things, but the cold, focused kind that helps you see exactly where you stand and what you need to do next. Where I stood was no college fund, no backup plan, and no family support. What I needed to do was figure out how to build a future from nothing. When I got home, Mom was in the kitchen making coffee before her day's shift at the diner. She looked like she hadn't slept, her eyes puffy and red-rimmed. "How are you feeling?" "This morning?" she asked, like I'd had the flu instead of my life destroyed. "Fine," I said. "I need to ask you something." "Okay." "Are you planning to help me figure out alternatives for college? Loans, scholarships, I can still apply for anything?" Mom stirred her coffee slowly. "Honey, it's too late for most financial aid. The deadlines were months ago." "So you're not planning to help?" "We'll help however we can, but realistically, you've decided my education isn't a priority," I finished. "Got it. That's not fair, Tamsin." "Fair?" I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "Mom, fair would have been asking me before you spent my money. Fair would have been telling me 3 weeks ago so I could start figuring out alternatives. Fair would have been treating my future like it mattered as much as Logan's recovery." Mom's coffee cup rattled against the saucer when she set it down. Logan could have died, and I could have had a future. But only one of those things mattered to you. I went upstairs and called Marlowe University's financial aid office. The woman who answered was sympathetic but clear, without the expected. Family contribution from my college fund, I would need to take out loans for nearly the full cost of attendance. With no credit history and no cosigner, my parents had made it clear they wouldn't qualify. I was looking at private loans with interest rates that would bury me in debt for decades. "I'm sorry," the woman said. "I know this is disappointing. You might want to consider starting at a community college and transferring after 2 years. It would be much more affordable." Community college. The backup plan for kids who hadn't worked hard enough to earn something better. Except I had worked hard enough. I'd done everything right. It just didn't matter a dot after I hung up. I sat in my room surrounded by boxes that now represented a future that would never happen. My laptop was open to the Marlowe University website, showing pictures of the campus I'd visited with Mom, the library where I planned to spend most of my time, the dorm room I'd never live in. I closed the laptop and started unpacking the boxes. That afternoon, I walked downtown to the only place in Millfield that was hiring Rosie's Diner, where Mom worked nights. It was a small place with cracked vinyl booths and a rotating pie case that hadn't worked in years. The kind of restaurant that survived on coffee and nostalgia. Rosie herself was working midday shift. A woman in her 60s with gray hair pulled back in a hairnet and orthopedic shoes that squeaked against the linoleum floor. "You're Charlotte's girl," she said when I walked in. "The one going to college." "Not anymore," I said. "I need a job." Rosie raised an eyebrow but didn't ask questions. "Can you work nights?" "I need someone for the 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. shift, Tuesday through Saturday. Night shifts. Like Mom's schedule, the kind of work that pays the bills but kills your social life and leaves you too tired for much else." Perfect. For someone whose social life and college plans had just been destroyed. "Yeah," I said. "I can work nights. When can you start?" "Tonight." Rosie handed me an apron with a name tag that read trainee and showed me to the supply closet in the back. Uniforms, black pants, white shirt, comfortable shoes. Tips split between day and night shift. Minimum wage plus whatever you can charm out of the truckers and insomniacs. The diner job came with a name tag, a locker in the break room, and the weird camaraderie of people who work while the rest of the world sleeps. My trainer was Kane Rowley, a guy about my age with dark hair that fell in his eyes and a dry sense of humor that made the long nights bearable. Doc Kane had graduated from Millfield High 2 years ahead of me, dropped out of community. College after one semester and now worked at the diner while saving money for culinary school. He lived in a converted van in the parking lot behind the restaurant, showered at the YMCA, and read cookbooks like other people read novels. "Let me guess," he said on my first night, watching me struggle with the ancient coffee machine. "College plans fell through?" "Something like that." "Family or money?" "Both." Kate nodded like he understood. "Yeah, that's usually how it goes. The people who are supposed to support you end up being the ones who sabotage you." I looked at him sharply. "What do you mean?" "I mean, families have this way of keeping you small. They tell you to dream big, but when you actually try to leave, suddenly there's always some crisis that requires you to stay and help. Always some reason why your plans have to wait." He was right, though I wasn't ready to admit it yet. Instead, I focused on learning the rhythms of night shift work, the truckers who stopped for coffee and directions, the police officers who came in around 2 a.m. for pie and gossip, the hospital, workers getting off late shifts who just wanted quiet booths and strong coffee. The work was mindless in the best way. Repetitive tasks that left my mind free to process everything that had happened. Wiping down tables, refilling sugar dispensers, learning to balance plates on my arms without dropping anything. My body was learning new routines while my brain tried to figure out what came next. After my first week, I had $180 in tips and wages. After 2 weeks, $360, it wasn't college money, but it was mine. Money I'd earned. Money no one could take away and spend on someone else's problems. Working nights also meant I was awake while my parents slept, which made it easier to avoid the conversations they kept trying to have about moving forward and making the best of the situation. I left for work when they were getting ready for bed, came home when they were getting ready for their day, slept while they were at work. We lived in the same house but barely saw each other, which suited me fine. Logan left for rehab a week after I started at the diner. I wasn't home when he said goodbye, but he left a note in my room. "Tamsin, I know this isn't your fault, and I'm sorry it cost you so much. I'm going to make this count." Logan, I crumpled up the note and threw it away. His apology didn't change anything. His good intentions didn't give me back my future. And his promise to make this count was just another version of the same promises he'd been making for years. But working at the diner did something unexpected. It gave me perspective. Watching Kane pursue his own plans despite family pressure and financial obstacles showed me that there were other ways to build a future. Other paths that didn't require traditional timelines or family support. "The thing about plans," Kane said one slow Tuesday night, "is that they're just that, plans. The actual life you end up living is usually different from what you planned. Sometimes better, sometimes worse, but always yours." Maybe he was right. Maybe the future I planned wasn't the only future worth having. But first, I had to stop mourning the one I'd lost and start building something new. 3 weeks into my new life as a night shift waitress, I discovered something unexpected. I was good at it. Not just competent, but actually skilled at reading. People anticipating what they needed, making conversation that felt genuine rather than forced. The truckers started asking for my section specifically, and my tip average was higher than Kane's, which he pretended to be annoyed about. "It's because you're young and cute," he said one slow Wednesday night, watching me count my tips. "It's because I actually listen when people talk," I shot back, but he wasn't entirely wrong. There was something about being 18 and female that made certain customers want to help me to leave bigger tips. To ask about my real plans like waitressing was obviously just temporary. I didn't correct them. Let them think I was working my way through college or saving up for something better. The truth that this job was my only option because My family had stolen my college fund wasn't something I felt like sharing with strangers. The routine of night work was starting to feel normal. Sleep until 3 p.m. Eat something that could pass for breakfast, get to the diner by 9:30 to prep for the 10 p.m. rush. The customers became familiar faces with predictable orders, and I learned their stories through fragments of conversations spread across multiple shifts. There was Detective Martinez, who came in every Thursday around midnight for coffee and lemon. Meringue Pie, always sitting in the corner booth where he could see the door. He was working a cold case involving a missing teenager, and sometimes he'd spread photos across the table, studying them while he ate. There was Carol, a nurse at the county hospital who stopped by after her shifts, always ordering decaf coffee and whatever sandwich looked freshest. She was putting her daughter through nursing school and worked double shifts to afford it, which made me both admire her and resent my own parents' choices. And there was Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman who came in every Friday at 2 a.m., ordered tea and toast, and sat in the same booth for exactly 1 hour. Kane told me she'd been doing this for 3 years, ever since her husband died. Because she couldn't sleep in their empty house, these people became part of my new world. The one I was building from the ruins of my old plans. It wasn't the world I'd wanted, but it was mine in a way my previous life had never been. No one at the diner cared about my GPA or my college acceptance letter. They cared about whether I remembered their coffee order and whether I could keep up with the pre-dawn rush. The work was also giving me something I hadn't expected. Material. The late-night customers, the conversations that happened when people were tired and vulnerable, the small dramas that played out in vinyl booths, all of it was rich with stories that my college-bound self would never have witnessed. I started keeping a notebook in my apron pocket, jotting down fragments of overheard conversations, interesting character details, moments that felt like they belonged in the stories I used to write for English class. Miss Velasquez, my high school English teacher, had always told us to write what we knew. Well, now I was learning things I'd never known before. 1 month into my diner career, Miss Velasquez herself walked in during the slow hours around 4 a.m. I was refilling salt shakers and didn't notice her until she slid into a booth in my section. "Tamsin," she said, and I looked up to see her familiar face, more tired than I'd ever seen it during school hours. "I heard you were working here." Miss Velasquez had been my favorite teacher, the one who'd encouraged my writing and helped me with my college essays. She'd also been one of the few adults who seemed to understand that I was carrying more weight than most teenagers, that my perfect grades and perfect attendance came at a cost. "Miss V," I said, grabbing the coffee pot. "What are you doing here?" "At 4 in the morning? Insomnia," she said. "And please call me Corinne. You're not my student anymore." I poured her coffee and sat down across from her. The diner was empty except for one trucker in the corner booth who was absorbed in his phone. "I was sorry to hear about college," she said. "Your mother mentioned the situation when I ran into her at the grocery store." I felt my face heat up. "What exactly did she say?" "Just that there had been some family financial difficulties and you decided to take a gap year." Corinne studied my face over her coffee cup. "But I'm guessing there's more to the story." Something about her calm, non-judgmental tone broke through the wall I'd built around the whole situation. Maybe it was the late hour, or the familiar comfort of talking to a teacher who'd always understood me, but I found myself telling her everything. The college fund, Logan's rehab, my parents' betrayal, the devastating realization that all my hard work had meant nothing. Corinne listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or asking a clarifying question. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "That's not a gap year," she said finally. "That's theft." The word hit me like a physical impact. Theft. I'd been thinking of it as betrayal, as unfairness, as my family choosing Logan over me. But Corinne was right. It was theft. They'd taken money that was mine, that I'd contributed to, that had been promised to me for 12 years. Have you considered legal action? She asked. I shook my head. It's family money. Technically, the account was in my dad's name. Doesn't matter. If money was specifically designated for your education and you contributed to it, you might have grounds for a lawsuit. I can't sue my parents. Why not? The question surprised me. Because they're my parents, and Logan is your cousin. But that didn't stop them from prioritizing his needs over yours. Corinne leaned forward. Tamsin, I've known you for 4 years. You've never asked for special treatment, never made excuses, never expected anything you hadn't earned. You're one of the most responsible, hardworking students I've ever taught, and your family is punishing you for that. They're not punishing me. They're using your strength against you. They're counting on the fact that you won't make a scene, won't fight back, won't do anything to disrupt the family peace. They're betting that you'll just accept this and figure out another way. She was right, and I hated that she was right. So, what am I supposed to do? I can't afford college without that money. There are other ways to get an education. Community college for 2 years, then transfer. Work-study programs. State schools with lower tuition. Corinne paused. Or you. Could do what I did? What did you do? Built my own path. I couldn't afford college either, so I worked for 2 years, saved every penny. Then went to community college part-time while working full-time. It took me 6 years to get my bachelor's degree and another 4 for my master's, but I did it on my own terms with my own money. I'd never known this about Miss Velasquez Corinne. She'd always seemed so confident, so established, like someone who'd never doubted her place in the world. The difference is, she continued, I didn't have to overcome my own family's sabotage. That makes your situation harder, but not impossible. I don't even know where to start. Corinne reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. Start here. I run a small literary magazine on the side. Nothing fancy, just local stories and essays. I've been looking for a contributing writer, someone young with a fresh perspective. The pay isn't much, but it's freelance work you can do around your schedule here. And it might help you figure out what you want to study when you do get to college. I took the card. Millfield Voices was printed in simple black text with Corinne's email and phone number below. What kind of stories? Whatever you want to write about. Local issues, human interest pieces, personal essays. The only requirement is that it has to be true and it has to matter to someone besides yourself. I thought about the notebook in my apron pocket, the fragments of stories I'd been collecting from late-night customers. I might have some ideas. Good. Send me something when you're ready. No deadline, no pressure. Just an opportunity when you want it. Corinne finished her coffee and left a $5 tip on a $2 check. After she was gone, I pulled out my notebook and looked at the scattered observations I'd been writing down. Maybe they weren't just random notes. Maybe they were the beginning of something. The next night, instead of sleeping after my shift, I went home and opened my laptop for the first time since the college fund conversation. I started writing about Mrs. Patterson, the widow who came to the diner every Friday at 2 a.m. because she couldn't sleep in her empty house. I wrote about the way she always ordered the same thing, always sat in the same booth, always left at exactly 3 a.m. like she was punching a time clock for grief. It wasn't a long piece, maybe 800 words, but it felt different from anything I'd written for school, more personal, more real. I was writing about someone whose story mattered, someone who might otherwise go unnoticed. I sent it to Corinne without overthinking it. with a subject line that read, "First submission. Let me know what you think." She replied within an hour. "This is exactly what I was hoping for. Can we publish it in next month's issue?" My first published piece. Not in a college newspaper or a prestigious magazine, but in a small local publication that paid $50 per article and reached maybe 300 readers. It wasn't the journalism career I'd planned, but it was a start that working at the diner and writing for No-Field Voices became my new routine. Instead of sleeping after my shifts, I'd spend a few hours writing about the people and stories I encountered. During the night, the work was teaching me things about human nature that I never would have learned in a college classroom, and writing about it was helping me process my own situation. I wrote about Detective Martinez and his cold case, about the way unsolved mysteries haunted the people who tried to solve them. I wrote about Carol, the nurse who worked double shifts to put her daughter through school, and the quiet heroism of parents who sacrificed without complaint. I wrote about Kane and his van life, about choosing freedom over comfort and following dreams that didn't fit traditional molds. Each article paid $50, which wasn't much but added up over time. More importantly, the writing was giving me a sense of purpose that I'd lost when my college plans disappeared. I was documenting lives that mattered, telling stories that needed to be told, using my voice in a way that felt meaningful. 3 months after starting at the diner, I had saved enough money to enroll in 2 classes at the community college for spring semester. Not the 4-year university experience I planned, but a beginning. And unlike the college fund my parents had stolen, this money was entirely mine. The letter arrived on a Tuesday in November. 3 months after I'd started working at the diner, I found it slipped under my bedroom door when I got home from my shift, written on the kind of lined notebook paper we'd used for assignments in middle school. "Tamsin," it began in Logan's careful handwriting. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I needed to write this." I almost threw it away without reading the rest. Almost. But something about the careful penmanship, so different from the scrawled notes Logan used to leave when he was using, made me curious enough to keep reading. I've been in treatment for 2 months now, and one of the things they make you do is take responsibility for the harm you've caused other people. I know I didn't personally take your college money, but I know it was taken because of me. I know my addiction cost you your future, and I'm sorry it doesn't even begin to cover that. The counselors here say addiction affects the whole family, not just the addict. They talk about how families enable addictive behavior by always providing a safety net, by sacrificing other family members' needs to protect the addict from consequences. I never thought about it that way before, but now I can see how many times Uncle Reed and Aunt Charlotte chose to help me instead of protecting you. I can't give you back your college fund. I can't undo the choice your parents made. But I want you to know that I see what happened, and I understand why you hate me. I would hate me too. I don't know if I'm going to stay clean this time. I want to, and I'm trying harder than I ever have before. But I also know I've said that before. What I do know is that if I relapse again, I won't let it cost you anything else. I won't ask your family for help, and I won't let them offer it. You deserved better from all of us. You deserve to have your dreams protected instead of sacrificed. I'm sorry we failed you. Logan, P.S. I heard you're working at Rosie's and writing for some magazine. Good for you. Maybe you'll find a better path than the one we took away. I read the letter 3 times, then sat on my bed staring at it. For months, I'd been carrying anger toward Logan like a stone in my chest, blaming him for destroying my future, even though I knew, logically, that my parents had made the choice to spend my money. This letter forced me to confront the complexity of the situation in a way I hadn't been ready for before. Logan was right about the enabling. I could see it now, looking back at years of family crises that had always been resolved by sacrificing something or someone else to fix Logan's problems. My parents' willingness to drain my college fund wasn't an isolated decision. It was the culmination of a pattern that had been building for years. But reading Logan's apology also forced me to confront something else, the choice I had to make about who I wanted to be going forward. I could stay angry, keep nursing my resentment, let bitterness define my response to what had happened. Or I could channel that anger into something more useful. The next day, I did something I hadn't done. In months, I called my parents and asked them to meet me for lunch. We agreed on Mel's Diner, a different restaurant from where I worked. Neutral territory for what I expected would be a difficult conversation. They were already sitting in a booth when I arrived, looking nervous and hopeful in equal measure. Mom had dressed up, her good sweater and the earrings she usually saved for church. Dad was wearing a button-down shirt instead of his usual work clothes. They looked like people going to a job interview or a court hearing. "Tamsin," Mom said, standing up to hug me, "you look good. How are you doing?" "I'm fine," I said, sliding into the booth across from them. "We need to talk." "Okay," Dad said cautiously. "About what? About Logan's letter? About what happened? About where we go from here?" They exchanged a look. "Logan wrote to you?" Mom asked. "Yesterday. He apologized for the role his addiction played in your decision to spend my college money." I paused, choosing my words carefully. It made me realize that I need to be clear about some things. The waitress came over to take our orders, giving me a moment to collect my thoughts. When she left, I looked directly at my parents. "I'm not going to pretend that what you did was okay," I said. "You stole my future to pay for Logan's addiction, and no amount of family loyalty or good intentions changes that fact." Dad started to interrupt, but I held up my hand. "I'm not done. You also lied to me for 3 weeks, letting me make plans and buy textbooks and get excited about a future that you knew wasn't going to happen. That was cruel and it was cowardly." Mom's eyes were filling with tears, but I couldn't let that stop me. But here's what I figured out over the past few months. Staying angry isn't going to get me my college fund back. It's not going to change the choices you made, and it's not going to help me build the life I want. "So, what are you saying?" Dad asked. "I'm saying that I'm done expecting you to prioritize my dreams. I'm done believing that working hard and following the rules means anything to you. I'm done thinking of my future as something that depends on your support." Mom reached across the table like she was going to take my hand, then stopped. "Tamsin, we love you. I know you do. But you love Logan too. And when you had to choose between his immediate crisis and my long-term future, you chose him. I understand why you made that choice, but I also understand what it tells me about my place in this family." "That's not fair," Dad said. "Logan was going to die, and I was going to live, so my dreams are expendable." "I get it, they're responsible. KID can handle disappointment. The strong kid doesn't need protecting. The good kid will figure something out." I took a deep breath. Well, you're right. I am figuring something out. But I'm doing it without expecting anything from you. "What does that mean?" Mom asked. "It means I'm not moving back home after my lease is up. It means I'm not asking for your help with anything. Not money, not co-signing loans, not emotional support. It means I'm building a life that doesn't depend on people who see my stability as a reason to sacrifice my opportunities." I'd been thinking about this for weeks, ever since Corinne had pointed out that my family was using my strength against me. The decision to move out wasn't about punishment, it was about self-preservation. "You're 8, Dad said. "How are you going to afford your own place?" I'm working full-time, and I have a writing gig that pays extra. Kane found an apartment above the bookstore downtown that we can split. It's small, but it's ours. This was partially true. Kane had mentioned the apartment, and I'd been thinking about asking if he wanted a roommate. But I also knew that living at home was making it impossible for me to move forward. Every day in that house was a reminder of what I'd lost, of how little my dreams had mattered when the family needed sacrifice. Tamsin, Mom said, you don't have to do this. We can work things out as a family. No, I said. We can't. Because working things out as a family means I compromise and everyone else gets what they need. It means I'm the one who adjusts my expectations and accepts less than I earned. That's not true. It is true, Mom. It's been true my whole life. I'm the good kid, so I don't get birthday parties because money's tight. I'm the responsible one, so I babysit Logan when he's detoxing instead of going to homecoming. I'm the strong one, so I can handle having my college fund stolen. Saying it out loud, listing the pattern of sacrifices I'd made over the years, made me realize how long this had been building. The college fund wasn't the first time my needs had been deemed less important than everyone else's. It was just the biggest. We never asked you to sacrifice, Dad started. You didn't have to ask. You just expected it. And I gave it because I thought it meant something. Because I thought being the good kid would protect me when it mattered. I stood up from the booth, but it didn't protect me. It just made me an easier target. Where are you going? Mom asked. To work. I have a shift in an hour. I pulled a $20 bill from my pocket and left it on the table. Lunch is on me. Consider it the last thing you'll get from my college fund. Walking away from that conversation felt like stepping off a cliff, scary and liberating at the same time. For the first time in months, I wasn't waiting for my parents to apologize or make things right. I wasn't hoping they'd realize what they'd done and find a way to fix it. I was just moving forward on my own terms. That night at the diner, I told Kane about the apartment above Bindery Books. You serious about moving out? He asked, wiping down the counter. Dead serious. I can't live at home anymore. Every day there feels like drowning. Kane nodded. I get it. When are you thinking? As soon as possible, end of the month, maybe. Works. For me, fair warning though, the apartment's tiny and the shower pressure sucks. I don't care about shower pressure. I care about not living in a house where my dreams don't matter. 2 weeks later, I moved my belongings into a one-bedroom apartment above Mr. Henderson's bookstore. It had a kitchenette with a half-size refrigerator, a living room that could barely fit a couch and coffee table, and a bedroom that Kane and I divided with a curtain hung from the ceiling. The rent was $400 a month plus utilities, more than I'd ever paid for anything, but manageable between our two incomes. The apartment came with unexpected benefits, free access to the bookstore after hours, which meant I could borrow books and have a quiet place to write when the diner was too noisy. Mr. Henderson, who remembered me as the quiet kid who'd worked part-time through high school, also offered me occasional freelance work helping with inventory and online sales for the first time since graduation. I felt like I was building something instead of just surviving the wreckage of my old plans. The apartment wasn't much, but it was mine. The writing for Millfield Voices was getting more sophisticated, and Corinne had started giving me larger assignments that paid better. I was even thinking about applying to community college for the following fall. But the most important thing was the sense of agency I gained. I wasn't waiting for anyone to rescue me or fix the situation anymore. I wasn't hoping my parents would realize their mistake and find a way to send me to college after all. I was creating my own path forward, one shift and one article at a time. Logan's letter had been right about one thing. I was finding a better path than the one they'd taken away. Not better in the way I'd originally planned, but better in the sense that it was entirely mine. Spring semester at Millfield Community College began with 2 classes: Introduction to Journalism and College Composition. It wasn't the prestigious university experience I planned, but sitting in those classrooms felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I thought was lost forever. The journalism professor, Dr. Sarah Chun, was a former newspaper reporter who'd moved to teaching after 20 years covering local politics and crime. She had the kind of practical knowledge I craved: how to find sources, how to ask the right questions, how to write stories that mattered to readers. Journalism isn't about perfect prose, she told us on the first day. It's about truth-telling. It's about paying attention to the stories that other people miss. I thought about the notebook I'd been carrying at the diner, the fragments of stories I'd been collecting from late-night customers. Maybe all those months of watching people at their most vulnerable had been an education after all. For our first assignment, Dr. Chun asked us to write a profile of someone in our community whose story deserved to be told, while other students interviewed local business owners or city council members. I wrote about Mrs. Patterson, the widow who came to the diner every Friday at 2 a.m. I'd been serving Mrs. Patterson for months, but I'd never asked her about her story until I needed it for class. When I approached her during one of her regular visits, she seemed surprised that anyone was interested. "Why would you want to write about me?" she asked. "I'm just an old woman who can't sleep." "That's exactly why," I said. "Everyone has a story. Most people just don't have anyone asking the right questions." Mrs. Patterson told me about the 53 years she'd been married to Harold, about the way they met at a church dance when she was 19 and he was 21. She told me about the small house they'd bought together, the garden Harold had tended until arthritis made it impossible, the way they'd watched the town change around them as the mill closed and young people moved away. "Harold died on a Tuesday," she said. "Heart attack in his sleep. I woke up and he was just gone. No warning, no goodbye." The Friday night visits to the diner had started because Tuesday nights were the hardest. She couldn't sleep in their bed, couldn't bear the silence of the house, couldn't escape the memory of waking up alone. "The diner helps," she explained. "There are other people awake, other stories happening. It reminds me that the world doesn't stop just because mine did." I wrote her story carefully, focusing on the small details that revealed larger truths about grief and community and the ways people survive unimaginable loss. When Dr. Chun handed back our papers the following week, mine had an A+ at the top and a note: "This is exactly the kind of story journalism needs more of. Have you considered applying to transfer to a 4-year program?" Transfer. The word hit me like a physical impact. I'd been so focused on surviving day to day, on building a life from the wreckage of my original plans, that I hadn't considered the possibility of getting back on track toward my original goals. After class, I stayed behind to talk to Dr. Chun about transfer programs. She explained that community college credits would transfer to most state universities, that my grades and work experience might make me a competitive candidate for journalism programs. "The path isn't traditional," she said, "but some of the best journalists I know took unconventional routes to get where they are. Real-world experience often matters more than the prestige of your undergraduate institution." That afternoon, I walked downtown to Bindery Books to tell Mr. Henderson about the possibility of transferring. I found him in the back office, surrounded by stacks of invoices and looking overwhelmed by the business side of running a bookstore. "College again?" he said when I explained the situation. "That's wonderful, Tamsin. You're too smart to be stuck in a small town forever." "I might not be stuck," I said, "but I also might not be able to afford it even at a state school." Mr. Henderson leaned back in his chair, thinking. You know, I've been meaning to talk to you about something. The bookstore has been doing better since you started helping with the online sales, and I've been thinking about expanding. Maybe offering writing workshops, hosting author events, building more of a community space. That sounds great. I need someone to help coordinate all. That. Someone who understands writing and community. Someone who could work with local schools and organizations. He paused. Someone who might want to work more hours for better pay while they're finishing their education. The offer was generous, 20 hours a week at $15 an hour, plus the opportunity to organize events and workshops that would give me real experience in literary community building. Combined with my writing for Millfield Voices and reduced shifts at the diner, it would be enough to cover community college tuition and still contribute to rent. There's one condition, Mr. Henderson added. You have to promise me you'll apply to transfer programs for next fall. This job is supposed to support your education, not replace it. I agreed immediately. For the first time since graduation, I had a clear path forward that didn't require family support or financial aid I couldn't qualify for. Community college for another year, then transfer to a state university with in-state tuition. It would take longer than my original plan, but it would get me to the same destination. That evening, I called Corinne to tell her about the new job and the possibility of transferring. I'm proud of you, she said. 6 months ago, you were devastated and angry and convinced your future was over. Now you're building something better than what you originally planned. Better how? Because it's entirely yours. Because you're not dependent on anyone else's money or support or approval. Because you've learned things about resilience and independence that most college students never learn. She was right, though I was only beginning to understand it. The months of working at the diner, writing for the magazine, learning to live on my own terms, all of it had taught me skills that couldn't be learned in a classroom. I spent the next few weeks researching transfer programs at Ohio University, Miami University, and Ohio State. My community college grades were excellent. And my portfolio of published articles from Millfield Voices was stronger than anything I could have written as a traditional freshman. The application essays were the hardest part. How do you explain that your college fund was stolen to pay for your cousin's rehab without sounding bitter? How do you frame family betrayal as a growth experience? I wrote draft after draft, trying to find the right tone. Too angry, and I'd sound like someone who couldn't move past adversity. Too forgiving, and the real impact of what happened would be lost. Finally, I decided to focus on what I'd learned rather than what I'd lost. I wrote about the stories I discovered working night shifts, about the education I'd gotten from serving coffee to insomniacs, and listening to the problems of people who had nowhere else to go. I wrote about finding my voice as a writer not in a university classroom, but in the break room of a small-town diner. Journalism school taught me that the best stories are often found in the places other people don't think to look. I wrote in my Ohio University application. Working at a 24-hour diner taught me that those places are everywhere, if you're willing to pay attention. The applications went out in March, and the waiting began. Unlike my senior year of high school, when getting into college had felt like the most important thing in the world, this time the outcome felt less crucial. I had backup plans, alternative paths, a sense of my own agency that hadn't existed before. If I got into transfer programs, great. If I didn't, I'd continue building my writing career through community college and freelance work. Either way, I'd be moving forward on my own terms. The first acceptance letter came in April from Ohio University's journalism program. When I opened the email and saw "Congratulations," I felt a quiet satisfaction rather than the explosive joy I'd expected. Getting into college was no longer a validation of my worth. It was just the next step in a path I was already walking. I called Corinne first, then Dr. Chun, then Mr. Henderson. Each of them congratulated me, but they also asked the same question. Are you going to tell your parents? I'd been thinking about that for weeks. My parents and I had maintained polite but distant contact since I'd moved out. They knew I was working and taking classes, but we rarely talked about anything substantial. The old closeness was gone, replaced by a careful formality that protected all of us from harder conversations, but transfer to a 4-year university felt significant enough to share. That evening, I drove to the house where I'd grown up, the house that no longer felt like home, to tell them about my acceptance. Mom answered the door looking surprised to see me. Tamsin, is everything okay? Everything's fine. I have some news I wanted to share. She called Dad from the kitchen and we sat in the living room where months earlier they told me my college fund was gone. The symmetry felt intentional. I got accepted to Ohio University's journalism program, I said. I'll be transferring in the fall. Both of them looked genuinely happy, which surprised me. That's wonderful, Mom said. We're so proud of you. How? Are you paying for it? Dad asked, which was exactly the question I'd expected. Combination of things. I qualified for in-state tuition, I have savings from work, and I got a small scholarship based on my writing portfolio. I paused. I'm doing it myself. I don't need help from anyone. The emphasis on anyone wasn't subtle and Dad caught it. Tamsin, we've never stopped wanting to help you succeed. You just prioritized other things when I needed help the most. Logan was in crisis, and I'm not anymore, I interrupted. I figured out how to build a future without depending on people who see my dreams as negotiable. Mom looked like she wanted to cry. Do you think you'll ever forgive us? I don't know, I said honestly. I'm not carrying anger around anymore. If that's what you're asking. But forgiveness isn't the same as trust, and trust isn't something I'm ready to rebuild yet. We talked for another hour, awkward but civil conversation about my classes, my writing, my plans for the future. When I left, both of them hugged me, and for a moment it felt almost normal. But driving home to the apartment I shared with Kane, I realized that normal wasn't what I wanted anymore. Normal was being the good kid who sacrificed her dreams to keep family peace. Normal was accepting less than I deserved because other people's needs seemed more urgent. What I wanted was the life I was building, messy, unconventional, entirely mine. A life where my dreams weren't dependent on other people's choices, where my future couldn't be traded away for someone else's crisis. Transfer to Ohio University wasn't just the next step in my education. It was proof that I could rebuild everything they'd taken from me and make it stronger than it was before. The confrontation I'd been avoiding finally happened on a Tuesday in June, 3 months before I was supposed to transfer to Ohio University. I was working the day shift at Bindery Books, helping Mr. Henderson set up for a poetry reading. When my phone rang, it was Aunt Evelyn. I almost didn't answer. Aunt Evelyn and I had spoken maybe 5 times in my entire life, always brief conversations. At family gatherings that felt more like obligation than genuine connection. But something made me pick up the call. Tamsin, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I need to talk to you. Can you meet me somewhere? Is Logan okay? I asked, because that seemed like the most likely reason for her to call. Logan's fine. He's been clean for almost 9 months. This is about something else. We agreed to meet at the coffee shop downtown, neutral territory away from both our families. I told Mr. Henderson I'd be back in an hour and walked the 3 blocks to grind coffee, wondering what crisis had prompted this unprecedented outreach. Aunt Evelyn was already there when I arrived. sitting in a corner booth with her hands wrapped around a coffee cup. She looked older than I remembered, with gray streaks in her hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of years of worry. "Thank you for coming," she said when I sat down across from her. "I wasn't sure you would. What's this about?" She took a deep breath. "It's about the money, your college fund. What happened to you because of Logan?" I'd been expecting this conversation eventually, but not from her. "Okay, Logan told me about the letter he sent you, about how he's taking responsibility for the harm his addiction caused the family." Aunt Evelyn paused. "But I'm the one who asked Reed and Charlotte to help pay for his treatment. I'm the one who pushed them to use their college money." This was new information. I'd assumed the decision had been entirely my parents', that Aunt Evelyn had simply accepted their offer to help. Learning that she'd actively lobbied for it changed the dynamic of what had happened. "Why?" I asked. Because I was desperate. Because Logan had already overdosed twice, and I was terrified he was going to die. Because the treatment program said they had a spot available, but we had to pay the deposit immediately or they give it to someone else. "So you asked my parents to steal my college fund." "I asked them to help save my son's life," she said, defensive. "I didn't think about what it would cost you." "You didn't think about it, or you didn't care." Aunt Evelyn flinched. "I thought you'd figure something else out. You're smart, you're responsible, you always land on your feet. Logan was dying." There it was again. The assumption that my strength meant my dreams were expendable, that my ability to survive meant I didn't deserve protection. "Did you know how much money was in that account?" I asked. "Not exactly." Reed said it was enough to cover the treatment costs. It was almost $38,000. 12 years of savings. Money my parents had promised me since I was 6 years old for college. Aunt Evelyn looked genuinely shocked. "I didn't know it was that much. I thought maybe it was a few thousand, money you could replace with student loans or something. Even if it had been a few thousand, you still would have been asking them to take money that wasn't theirs to give." "I was trying to save my son. And they were trying to help you, but nobody was trying to protect me." We sat in silence for a moment. Around us, the coffee shop hummed with the usual afternoon energy, college students studying, retirees reading. Newspapers, mothers with strollers meeting for playdates. Normal people living normal lives, not dealing with the wreckage of addiction and family betrayal. "Logan's been clean for 9 months, Aunt Evelyn said finally. "The treatment worked. He's living in a halfway house in Columbus, working at a warehouse, going to meetings every day. He's different this time. Good for him. He wants to pay you back, the money for college. He's saving everything he can from his job." I almost laughed. At warehouse wages? How long do you think it would take him to save $38,000? He knows it will take time. It would take him years, assuming he stays clean and doesn't have any emergencies. And that's assuming I wait around for money that might never come from someone whose sobriety I have no reason to trust. Aunt Evelyn's face crumpled. "He's really trying this time." "He's tried before, multiple times. Why should this be different?" "Because he understands what his addiction cost. Not just him, but everyone who tried to help him. He sees how it hurt you. His understanding doesn't give me back the year of college I lost. It doesn't undo the damage to my relationship with my parents. It doesn't change the fact that I had to build an entirely new life from scratch." "I know, and I'm sorry." The apology felt too little, too late. Not because Aunt Evelyn didn't mean it, but because sorry couldn't fix what had been broken. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because Logan's been talking about reaching out to you directly. He wants to apologize in person, maybe work out some kind of payment plan for what he owes you." She paused. I wanted to talk to you first to see if that's something you'd be open to. I thought about Logan's letter, about the careful way he'd written his apology and acknowledged the harm his addiction had caused. Part of me was curious about what he might say in person, about whether he truly changed or if this was just another performance in a long history of false promises. But a larger part of me wasn't interested in being part of Logan's recovery journey. I'd spent too much time already paying the price for his choices. No, I said. I don't want to meet with Logan. I don't want his apologies, and I don't want promises about paying me back someday. But if he's really changed, then I'm happy for him. But his sobriety isn't my responsibility, and his guilt isn't my problem to solve. Aunt Evelyn looked like I'd slapped her. He's trying to make amends. Making amends isn't about what makes the addict feel better. It's about not causing more harm to the people they've already hurt. I stood up from the table. Logan making amends to me means staying clean without expecting anything from me in return. It means not involving me in his recovery process. It means understanding that some damage can't be undone with apologies. That seems harsh. What's harsh is asking an 18-year-old to sacrifice her college fund for your son's 4th rehab stint. What's harsh is expecting me to participate in his recovery journey after he destroyed my future. I picked up my purse. I'm glad Logan is clean. I hope he stays that way. But I'm not going to be part of his story anymore. Walking back to the bookstore, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Relief that I'd finally said everything I needed to say about the situation. Sadness that cutting ties with Logan meant further estrangement from my extended family. But I was learning to prioritize my own emotional health over family expectations. I was learning that forgiveness didn't require ongoing relationship, that you could wish someone well while still protecting yourself from further harm. When I got back to Bindery Books, Mr. Henderson took one look at my face and asked if I needed to take the rest of the day off. I'm fine, I said. Just had a difficult conversation. Family? Former family, I said, and realized it was true. That evening, I had dinner with Kane at our apartment and told him about the conversation with Aunt Evelyn. He listened without commenting until I finished the whole story. You know what I think? He said finally. What? I think you've outgrown them. All of them. You're building something bigger than what they can understand. He was right. The life I was creating, college, career, independence, was outside the framework of my family's experience. They understood crisis and survival and getting by, but they didn't understand ambition that reached beyond immediate needs. Maybe that's okay, I said. Maybe outgrowing your family is part of growing up. Maybe it is. 2 weeks later, I got an email from Dr. Chen about a summer internship opportunity at the Columbus Dispatch. It was unpaid, but it would give me real newsroom experience before I transferred to Ohio University in the fall. I applied immediately, submitted clips from my work with Millfield Voices, and got an interview within a week. The editor who interviewed me was impressed by my portfolio and my work experience. Most interns come to us straight from college with no real-world experience, she said. You've actually been out there reporting on your community, learning to find stories that matter to readers.
That's exactly what we need.
I got the internship. The Columbus Dispatch office was everything I'd imagined a real newsroom would be. Desks, cluttered with papers and coffee cups, reporters making phone calls and typing furiously, the constant sense of deadlines and breaking news. My job was mostly administrative at first, but within a few weeks I was pitching story ideas and writing articles that actually got published. My first byline in a major newspaper was on a story about small-town diners as community gathering places, drawing on my experience at Rosie's to explore how these spaces function as informal social services for people who fall through other cracks. The story was picked up by several other Ohio papers, and my editor asked me to pitch more ideas along the same lines. "You have an eye for stories that other people miss," she told me. "That's not something you can teach." Working at the Dispatch. That summer, I realized that everything I'd been through, the betrayal, the financial struggle, the necessity of building my own path, had made me a better journalist. I understood economic insecurity in a way my privileged classmates wouldn't. I knew what it felt like to have your plans destroyed and have to start over. I had access to stories and perspectives that came from living outside the middle class bubble that most journalism students never left. By August, when my internship ended, I had a portfolio of published articles, contacts in the industry, and a clear sense of the kind of journalist I wanted to become. Someone who paid attention to the people and stories that other reporters overlooked. Someone who understood that the most important news wasn't always happening in boardrooms and government offices. I also had an offer from the Dispatch to continue freelancing for them while I was in school at Ohio University. Real work, real money, real experience that would set me apart from other journalism students. The night before I left for Ohio University, I drove past the house where I'd grown up. The lights were on in the kitchen, and I could see my parents moving around inside, living their lives without me. For a moment, I felt a pang of loss for the relationship we used to have, for the family we might have been if different choices had been made. But mostly I felt grateful. Grateful that their betrayal had forced me to become someone stronger than I'd ever imagined I could be. Grateful that losing the future I planned had taught me to build something better. I was 20 years old, heading to college with my own money, my own apartment, and my own career already beginning. It wasn't the path I'd originally planned, but it was entirely mine. 2 years later, I'm sitting in the newsroom of the Ohio University Post, putting the finishing touches on my senior portfolio. The collection includes articles I've written in for the Columbus Dispatch, pieces from my internship at Cleveland Scene magazine, and a long-form feature about addiction and family dynamics that won a statewide collegiate journalism award. The addiction piece was the hardest thing I've ever written, not because of the research or the interviews, but because it forced me to examine my own story with the kind of objectivity I'd learned to apply to other people's lives. I interviewed families dealing with addiction, treatment professionals, people in recovery. I read studies about family dynamics and enabling behaviors. And I wrote about what happens to the good family members who get sacrificed to save the addicted ones. The article didn't mention Logan by name, but anyone who knew our family history would recognize the story. It was my way of taking control of the narrative, of turning my experience into something that might help other families avoid making the same choices mine had made. When the piece was published in the university magazine, I got emails from dozens of readers. People who'd had their college funds raided for siblings rehab. People who'd been expected to sacrifice their dreams to enable family members' addiction. People who'd been told they were strong enough to handle disappointment while others were deemed too fragile to face consequences. The response taught me that my story wasn't unique, that families across the country were making the same calculations mine had made, weighing one child's crisis against another child's future, and almost always deciding that the crisis trumped the dream.
I also heard from Logan.
His email arrived 3 weeks after the article was published, subject line reading simply, "Thank you." I almost deleted it without reading, but curiosity won out. Tamsin. It began. "I read your article about families and addiction.
I know you
Didn't write it about me specifically, but I recognized our story in it. Thank you for helping me understand something I've been struggling with in recovery. My sponsor has been pushing me to make direct amends to you, and I've been frustrated that you won't meet with me or accept my apologies. Reading your article made me realize that my need to apologize is about my guilt, not about what's best for you. Real amends means not causing more harm, even if that means living with the discomfort of unresolved guilt. I've been clean for
3 years now.
I have a steady job, my own apartment, and I'm taking classes part-time. I'm building something sustainable instead of just surviving from crisis to crisis. I hope that counts for something, even if you never want to see me again. I heard from Aunt Charla that you're graduating college this spring and already have a job lined up at a newspaper in Cincinnati. I'm proud of you for building a life despite what my addiction cost you. You deserve better from all of us. I won't contact you again unless you reach out first. But I wanted you to know that I'm doing the work to become someone worthy of the sacrifices that were made for me, even if I can't undo the harm those sacrifices caused. Logan, I read the email twice, then forwarded it to Dr. Chun, who'd become a mentor and friend over the years. Her response was immediate. This is what real accountability looks like. He's taking responsibility without demanding anything from you in return.
She was right.
For the first time, Logan was acknowledging that his recovery was his responsibility, not mine. That making amends didn't require my participation or forgiveness. That the best thing he could do for me was to stay clean and leave me alone. I didn't respond to his email, but I did feel something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, exactly, but a kind of closure. The Logan who wrote that email understood things the Logan who'd written the first letter hadn't yet grasped. Maybe he really was different this time. 3 weeks before graduation, I got a call. From Mom, we'd maintained sporadic contact over the years, birthday cards, occasional phone calls, awkward family dinners when I was home for holidays. The relationship was civil but distant, nothing like the closeness we'd had when I was younger. I wanted to invite you to dinner, she said, to celebrate your graduation. Your dad and I are really proud of everything you've accomplished.
I almost
said no. The old pattern of family dinners where we pretended everything was normal had lost its appeal years ago. But something in her voice made me reconsider. Just dinner? I asked. No lectures about family loyalty or expectations that I'll move back home. Just dinner. And maybe a chance to talk about things we should have talked about years ago. We met at Applebee's, the same restaurant where we'd celebrated my high school. Graduation 4 years earlier. The symmetry felt intentional, a way of acknowledging how much had changed while honoring where we'd started. Both my parents looked older, more worn down by the years of family crisis and financial struggle.
But
they also looked genuinely happy to see me, proud in a way that felt different from their usual combination of love and disappointment. Tell us about the job, Dad said after we ordered. Cincinnati, right? Cincinnati Enquirer. General assignment reporter to start, but they know I'm interested in social issues and investigative work. I paused.
It's everything I wanted when
I was 18, just took a longer path to get there. Are you happy? Mom asked. The question surprised me. Not because it was unexpected, but because the answer was so clearly yes. I was happy. Not in the uncomplicated way I'd been happy as a child, but in the deeper way that comes from building something yourself, from surviving difficulties and coming out stronger. Yeah, I said. I am. The path wasn't what I planned, but the destination is better than what I originally imagined. Better how? Dad asked. Because it's mine. Because I know I can handle whatever comes next. Because I learned things about resilience and independence that I never would have learned if college had been easy. We talked for 2 hours, longer than we'd talked in years. They told me about their own struggles since I'd moved out, Dad's. Health scare, Mom's worry about retirement, their ongoing concern about Logan and Aunt Evelyn. I told them about my internships, my writing awards, my plans for the future. Near the end of dinner, Mom reached across the table and took my hand. I need to say something I should have said years ago. I tensed, expecting another justification for what they'd done. "I'm sorry," she said. "Not sorry that we helped Logan. I still think that was the right thing to do. But sorry for how we did it. Sorry for not talking to you first, for not trying harder to find another solution, for not protecting your future the way we should have. It wasn't the apology I'd wanted when I was 18, but it was the one I needed now. An acknowledgement that they'd handled the situation badly, even if they still believed the core decision had been correct. "Thank you," I said. "Do you think we can rebuild some kind of relationship?" Dad asked. "Not the same as before, but something." I thought about it, maybe, but it has to be different. It has to be based on who I am now, not who you remember me being. "Who are you now?" Mom asked. "Someone who doesn't sacrifice her dreams for other people's crises. Someone who takes care of herself first. Someone who understands that love doesn't always mean putting family obligations above personal goals." They nodded, and I could see them trying to adjust their image of me from the compliant, accommodating daughter I'd been to the independent, self-directed woman I'd become. "We can work with that," Dad said. 2 months later, I graduated summa cum laude from Ohio University with a degree in journalism and a job waiting for me in Cincinnati. My parents came to the ceremony along with Dr. Chun, Corinne, and Mr. Henderson. Kane drove up from Millfield, where he was now running his own catering business, sitting at graduation, listening to speakers talk about following your dreams, and overcoming obstacles. I thought about the 18-year-old who'd had her college funds stolen 4 years earlier. She'd been devastated, angry, convinced her future was over. She'd been wrong about the future being over, but right about everything else changing. The future I was heading toward was better than the one she planned. Not because the obstacles had been valuable in themselves. Having my college funds stolen wasn't a gift or a blessing in disguise, but because being forced to build my own path had taught me skills I wouldn't have learned any other way. I'd learned to rely on myself instead of depending on other people's support. I'd learned to see opportunity in unexpected places. I'd learned to turn setbacks into stories, to find meaning in struggle, to build something stronger from broken pieces. Most importantly, I'd learned that my worth wasn't measured by how much I could sacrifice for other people, how much disappointment I could absorb without complaint, how much I could endure while still being called strong. My worth was measured by what I built, what I created, what I contributed to the world. And I was just getting started. The morning I left for Cincinnati, I drove past Rosie's Diner one last time. Through the window, I could see the night shift. Workers setting up for the day crowd, preparing coffee and organizing supplies in the eternal rhythm of service work. For a moment, I felt a pang of nostalgia for that time in my life, for the simplicity of showing up and doing the work and going home, but mostly I felt grateful. The diner had been a bridge between the life I'd lost and the life I was building. It had taught me about the dignity of all work, the stories that exist in every community, the importance of paying attention to people whose voices usually go unheard. All lessons I carry with me to Cincinnati, to whatever stories I'd find there, to whatever future I'd continue building one choice at a time. At 22, I was finally heading toward the career I dreamed about at 18. It had taken longer than planned, cost more than expected, and required sacrifices I'd never imagined making. But it was entirely mine in a way the original plan never could have been done, and that made all the difference. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.